Hello, this is Dr. Ulrich Scholten speaking. Today, I would like to talk about cybersecurity and air traffic control. We will look at threats, technologies, teams, and training. Just a few words about myself. I'm the founder and director of SkyRadar. You find us under SkyRadar.com. So I hold a PhD in information technology. I have been researching at KIT in Karlsruhe viral growth effects around IT and web platforms. For 20 years, I've been working in aviation security, and for 7 years, I've been working on cybersecurity. Today, we will talk about the four T's, I call them in cybersecurity: the threats, who are the attackers and how do they attack, the technology, what proactive and reactive technology do I need to apply to fight against, the teams, what do they do, how to build them, and who are they, and training, who to train and how. You know, I call this security in times of exponential change. Why are our paradigms of security changing so fast? Especially COVID, caused a rapid growth in digital end-to-end communication. Many people were working from home. We got accustomed to doing things with a computer end-to-end. But that was followed by a rapid growth in cybercrime. A multi-billion-dollar as-a-service market emerged. Just to give you some figures, which I took from Microsoft's last year's threat report, phishing attacks, as you all get them, where you're asked to give you your credentials or to go into a link, you need to pay up to 1,000 USD per a successful account takeover. Just 1,000 US dollars. And just imagine, less than $1 for 1,000 stolen pairs of usernames and passwords. You can buy in the dark web a ransomware attack kit for 66 US dollars. You pay that up front. And if you take over a big company or government or bank, you have to pay 30% of your profit to the malicious service provider. The aggravated security situation, which is caused by the war in the Ukraine, increased the fear of politically motivated cyber attacks. The old world was unconnected. We had dangers like, radio signal jamming and spoofing. We had, attacks on the radar itself, for instance, by DRFM jamming. We had unauthorized access in networks. The supply chain in the old world was paper-based. You gave in your bill of material, you got a stamp, you got it back. The airport. There was a risk of unauthorized access to a network in the airline operation centers also. But, there were clear borders of in these unconnected entities. The world was dual. There was a firewall. Outside, there was the unprotected world. Inside, there was the protected world. So the attacks were more likely on the radio or radar side. And that's why we at SkyRadar get most requests still in the moment on, hey, how do we fight jamming? How do we fight DRFM jamming on our radars? What do we do to detect them? That's important. But ladies and gentlemen, that is not all. Look at this here. The interconnected air traffic management and air traffic control looks differently. You still have, the radio signal jamming and spoofing. You still have in the ground surveillance, the radar jamming. But you know, you got a connection, a connected system, a data link between everything. So you can now send a large amount of data into the ATC center to close it down. You can inject malware and ransomware into the infrastructure. You can steal information and sensitive data in the connected ATM network. You remember when the flight from Greece was taken down in Belarus because the Secret Service of Belarus found that there is a person in the aircraft that they wanted to get hold of. They must have gotten the data from somewhere. They must have gotten access to the information of who was on that flight. And of course, another weak point is adding on the left side, you see cloud services, cloud storage. You know, unauthorized access can happen there easily. There's an article about that, which you might want to read, which gives you more details. The link is below. Let's go into these threats, you know. You saw them, some of them on the image before. You know, there's the classical electronic countermeasures, you know, like digital radio frequency, memory jamming or spoofing, you know, you falsify data. Just let me give you an example, you know, you send, the attacker sends, let's say, some 50 drones, you can get them for 500 euros, which is suitable payload. You place on them an active target, which is a symbol DRFM jammer. That jammer records the signal from the radar, and it falsifies it, it amplifies it, sends it back. So instead of the small drone, you see perhaps 1 or 50 A380 in the sky. You don't see the attacker. And if it's an intelligent DRM system, it might even attack into the side lobes of the radar, which allows it to position fake aircraft also at different positions in the sky. There's the denial of service attack, where the attacker floats a system and makes it non-operational. It bombards it with requests. Phishing, you know that, you know, you imitate legitimate messages to get access to your computer. These phishers get more and more professional. Brute force attack, so often run by artificial intelligence solutions. You guess the password or try to find it out and try all possible combinations. Perhaps, you know, they offer you in a targeted way something where you give a password, and based on that, they might either think you reuse it, or they might try to find out the logic of your passwords. A very dangerous attack is those which use a flaw in the USB protocol. Just imagine you're inside an air traffic control environment. Somebody comes with an excuse, asks you something, and while your interest is somewhere else, the person puts the USB in a slot of your computer and injects malicious code. And the code is inside, in spite of any firewall. Zero-day exploits. You use weaknesses of computer systems. There's horrible examples of that. For instance, some years ago, the all nuclear power plants in Iran were closed down by a virus which was called Stuxnet. It was simply embedded in the operating system of the computers that were delivered. And of course, it was not sensed by the firewall because it was delivered physically inside. Malware. It's malevolent programs with the goal to inadequately operate against you and your machine. There might be botnets, adware, there might be things that damage your system, ransomware, where somebody wants to hijack your system of spyware. When such a malware mimics a legitimate program, we call it Trojan. So it might be Trojan, that records what you do, analyzes your behavior, find your weak points. And then when this Trojan is able to spread automatically across the network, we call it a wall. This might be used as a man in the middle attack, an attacker which is between you, your screen, and the rest of the world. At a certain moment, it might hijack your whole screen without you noticing it, controlling the emails that you get, that you send, and tracking every password that you use. Then, in an intelligent way, at a certain moment, it might manipulate you. Give you some examples here. This is an information that I got from my friend Kenneth Vignali in the United States, who came up with a study from the Argentinian aeronautical researcher Eduardo Casanovas. He just simulated how you can hack the Asterix protocol. The Asterix protocol is the most important protocol of communication in the aviation industry. So you see, they hacked the PPI on the left has 3 targets, the original only 1. I asked my friend Peter Smirnov from the Cybersecurity Research Center in St. Petersburg, and he just gave me some interpretation of this typical attack scenario that you could apply on Asterix. He said, they typically start with a fuzzing attack, an automated process that is used to find application vulnerabilities in zero-day exploits. Then you run a static parser code analysis and behavioral analysis. He said that's what Russian hackers always do. So there is a strategy behind. And he said also, usually any protocol has an internal vulnerability. You just need to find it. And remember how many SSL or TLS were hacked, Afterwards, there comes the distortion phase, the attack phase. For instance, you cause a firmware crash, or you take over the whole system and want ransomware like it was required from, for instance, the American gas system. Just remember that in phishing, you only pay $100 to $1,000 for a successful account takeover. It's not difficult to get access to bad material to run attacks, and there's much money in it. When the attacker knows the secret or sits inside the firewall, security measures may fail. So let's grab the focus on purely old school jamming, with the classical jamming technology and electronic warfare. Only a specific entry point of a network can be reached, primary radar or secondary. With intelligent cyber attacks, the attacker can slowly prepare an attack, conquer the complete infrastructure. You wouldn't notice it if you're not prepared. And at time X, the attacker might switch down, instead of one radar in the old approach, the complete country. This is why we have to be very vigilant. This is why we have to keep working with classical, what we call electronic countermeasures. But we have to also be able to defend cyber attacks. What does ICAO do to defend cyber attacks? There's the ICAO cybersecurity strategy. It assigns you to do the job. It gives you high-level information. But as my colleague Alexandra Gunnowick from VMware says, you cannot outsource responsibility. You are responsible for the safety of the people who work in your system, or the security of the data. You are responsible. So what to do? Let me just show you how We structure cybersecurity. We embrace proactive and reactive steps. I call this a multi-stage approach to keep hackers, terrorists, and state-conducted espionage out. The proactive side. This is cybersecurity architecture. You've got cybersecurity systems for data encryption, data privacy and security, for identity management and access management of humans, machines, and codes. Firewalls, packet filtering, connection tracking, incident detection response, endpoint detection. This is part of it. You set up and implement this with experts in cooperation with all concerned players, led by security operation centers, which we call SOC. There's the reactive part, which is monitoring and response. Monitoring means monitoring and evaluating threats and determining which threat require action. And then the response. When a possible threat has occurred and identified, it must be isolated, analyzed, and destroyed. This is operated by, we call the Cybersecurity Incident Response Team, CSIRT. We'll talk a couple of times later about this. It's often a division of the Security Operations Center, SOC, and it is probably a subdivision of your ANSEP team. Let's first talk about proactive security. The proactive security, I structured this in the core on the top, and then in 4 different activities. You might do it in a more fine granulated way, but I think my coarse granulated approach here is good enough to give you an overview. At the core of it, we call it the root of trust, is the hardware security module. And this is where you create keys and store them and make sure that the public key or a symmetric key infrastructure is operated. Then you have a key management system which manages the key life cycle from the generation through the regular change to the destruction after a certain time, so that keys remain fresh and cannot get into the wrong hands. There is the policy enforcement and audit logging. Audit logging, of course, we need to log to see whether there's any problems, and at a certain moment we'll certainly also have compliance requirements, or we have to provide audits showing that our cybersecurity system is working. What does policy mean? The security policy includes, information sensitivity level, what information has a low, medium, or high sensitivity. And we assign this to various categories of information and give higher level rules to protect them, and also to define which group of people can have access. So we bring accountability to the people. We know which group of people has access to which information, and we can make sure that not everybody sees everything. Then we've got the key management security policy that needs to establish and specify rules for protecting the confidentiality, the integrity, the availability, and source authentication of all cryptographic keys, and the metadata used by the system. These rules, they cover the whole life cycle that I already defined before, including when the keys are operational, the data is operational, when it's stored, and when it's transported. Let's go to the next. No, sorry. So we talked about the core here, the root of trust. And now let's look at the different tasks. We've got identity management. The first one is protecting human identities. which is first of all the natural person. So if persons have an identity, somebody can with difficulty fake my identity. So the system can understand whether it's and check whether it's whether the person who pretends to be that person is it. If not, it is giving an alarm, and this can be checked, by trust service providers, even by those who are qualified by the governments. These human identities are not limited to natural persons, but also to legal persons, to companies. You can work with signatures or with seals that are linked to legal persons. And then we have to protect the identities of machines as well. When I get messages from a radio tower or from our DPS system or from a remote flight data processing system, I want to make sure that the data is coming from there. So I can also assign identities to these machines. And so the system can check it. If the identity is fake, I'll get an alarm. I can protect code. Often we have the problem that code was hacked and some Trojan was put into the code. If the code is signed with a digital signature, it cannot be changed anymore, because if it went wrong, the signature would get an error, we would get an alarm. We can protect documents, which is typical PDFs and messages. What is well known is that we protect documents with for instance, in Europe with the EIDAS-based signatures. For a PDF, this is done with the so-called PADIS-based standard. PADIS stands for PDF-based electronic digital electronic signatures. But we also can protect messages like XML with the XADIS, So we can sign messages and make sure that they are not changed during traveling and protected. If they're changed, we again get an alarm. So this is identity management. Very important. We have to protect everything, give everything an identity, especially, with the growing importance of the Internet of Things, where everything is connected. We have to make sure that everything has an identity. Europe is very strong because they have a strong system called EIDAS. It should be implemented here, and we should make sure that we use trust service providers to help us. Access management, we have to make sure that there's authentication procedures, using the identity that I already introduced, but also already other factors like, for instance, biometric checking or tokens to make sure that only the right people get access. Data protection, protect the data that is traveling or at rest should be encrypted. This is why the public key infrastructures here are so important, so that it's only used in the applications. But be aware, for an application, you need to decrypt the data. So during the application, data is vulnerable. And then, of course, we work more and more with clouds. So we have to make sure that this central system here brings the keys to the cloud, manages the applications in the cloud. We shouldn't give our data away from the cloud, from us to the cloud, as if we were not concerned. We should stay in charge, in control. We should be the masters of everything that happens in the cloud. Bring your own key, manage your own key, manage your own encryption. There's various terms for something with slight different meanings, but it all talks about the same thing. Stay in control, make sure the encryption here is yours. would like to thank for the things I presented previously on the proactive encryption. Priya Kumar from UTMACO, who was checking the infographic and discussing details with me before I presented it. Now let's talk about reactive security. The important thing here is that there is so much data going forth and back that it's not one person or a team of people who can control everything. So we need systems that we call security orchestration, automation, and response. Automated systems that help us work with all the data that is coming in and out. So the input is the many application protocol interfaces, coming from your radars, coming from your systems, coming from the RadNet. There's lots of inputs. Emails, still 80% of all attacks today happen with emails. The web, of course, you go to a wrong link, and you might have a hacker in your system. The cloud is another risk. You store your data there, and there might be third parties having access, or it might be attacked. We've got the firewall here. We've got incident detection softwares, IDS, and we've got increasingly the so-called endpoint detection software, software that is placed on any endpoint, whether it's a computer, a server, a network, or a thing, to make sure that there is nothing happening. And if it happens, we get an alarm. And then it runs, through such a system here where inputs are mapped into incident categories. There is the contacts, is the asset a critical one, like an important radar, or is it just, a trolley which is running on the runway? It could be stopped, is the alert critical, the SLA classification, there's lots of things that are important here. And there's certain playbooks that go into action based on the types of contacts. And then we automate it, escalate, enrich, response. And then we've got different types of response: defensive, forensic, offensive, and deception. And that's it. So I will go a little bit further in that, by looking at how we monitor systems. What you see here is a screen from one of our training environments for AdCert training and AdCode training in the context of system degradation. You see in our example, the example of the motor of a radar tower. You see its server CPU, you see the motor voltage is controlled and the motor RPM is controlled. You see whether it's available, and when there is an alarm, it's being flagged. ADAC processes may concern many critical infrastructures, and they're time critical. I once was flying to Luxembourg, and the Navates system was down, and it's time critical because you could not keep aircraft in the sky for many hours. So in my case, we had to be deviated to Brussels. Good intelligent monitoring systems allow for a rapid discovery of degraded and potentially compromised systems. We talked about software, but ladies and gentlemen, protection is about people. The proactive security management, it's about planning, setting up, infrastructure, key managing, optimizing, and based on cybersecurity policies, and the general security compliant behavior of everybody. Yeah, but there we can really use external people to help us planning, to help us setting it up. It becomes more different with the reactive security management. It's about continuous chase of intrusions, about analyzing patterns. It's more time-consuming and heavily involving internal personnel. It's happening all the time. Proactive is much internal. Reactive is about ADSAP, about the air traffic safety electronics personnel, because they are the ones who have to make sure that the systems are working. And I'm looking at this in depth now. Yeah, so this is, I start with this classical, we call a waterfall model. This is how challenges like this were classically addressed. You prepare, in setting up procedures, ranging from identifying incidents to recovery, security policies, and those include warning banners, behavioral guidelines, incident containment policies, and the definition of the concerned groups. It also includes the training of specific groups, the ADCO, the ADSAP, the admin, the CSIRT, the Cybersecurity Incident Response Team, security guards. The incident identification would be a next step, identifying what is actually happening, and then containment. Limit the scope and the magnitude of the incident, for instance, by switching off a subsystem in order not to endanger critical processes. We all know we couldn't switch off too many critical subsystems in air traffic control. The next thing is investigation, determining in a systematic review what happened to computers, network systems. Look at network device logs, system logs, application logs. Talk about that later again. Then eradicate it, get rid of it, do the cleanup. Recovery, set up the system, restore it, and follow up. What are the lessons learned? This is classical, and I want to say, that this linear run through something is not agile enough. We have to run in loops and circles. We have to improve things all the time, And I luckily got from the MRAE, I got this process coming from Jim Birch. He is one of the cybersecurity experts who is in charge of the CSIRT system. And he was presenting this approach here, where he goes through threat risks, vulnerabilities, SOAR automation, intelligence gaining, response, and documentation. On the top level in gray, you see the many threats that you have. I said before already, email is still 80%, but in our ATC contexts, our vulnerabilities might be much more likely in our many decentralized systems that we have here, cloud threat, internet threat, the end user identity. And all this goes into some general analysis. I call this here a Splunk analysis. Splunk is a software, I think it's even freeware, which helps you to index and correlate real-time data to generate searchable repositories. And this is fed by what we call the visibility stack here. This thing is very important. Much of it, by the way, is freeware. Other things are part of a system that you already have. The antivirus logs, take them in, make them searchable. There is other things like firewall logs, the VPN logs, the WIN logs, the email logs, two-factor authentication logs. You want to see if, for instance, a typical pattern, if at a certain moment in time, many people do two-factor authentication. Who should normally do that? You might wonder what is happening. Were they by some fake interface requested to do so, or is it even a machine, a Trojan that's doing it? The Office 365 logs, the endpoint detection and response logs, proxy service logs, the CASB, which is a cloud access security broker solution, which you can use as a a policy control point which you place between the user and the cloud application. Password reset logs. If passwords at a certain moment, let's say 1 o'clock at night on a weekend, are being changed all the time, that is a pattern that here can give indication of that something is going wrong. Here we get the alert queue. We have a stack here where we structure the alert in function of their importance. We have information lookups, like for instance, we have associations also in air traffic control, where air traffic control operators, NSPs, share their intrusion detection experience so that we can revert to that information. And then we enrich data. For instance, we have an email thread here, so we can enrich it with body, header, IP lookup, GUIP, domain age data. If there is a link, for instance, that we are requested to go to, and this link has a let's say we pretend, or the hacker pretends it is from ICAO, yeah? But the GUIP shows that the link is somewhere completely else, yeah? And the domain age says, well, the link has been set up yesterday. Come on, ICAO, somewhere in the desert, somewhere, domain age yesterday, something is wrong here, So this gives you later on, possibilities to analyze, and you may already understand. We talk much about patterns here, and this consequently will also lead to much of artificial intelligence and machine learning that will be run over it. We generate SOA alerts. We have we look at the last 2 of 8 pushes, as we say here. We do URL web crawling. We go into the URLs that we are requested, or that our people requested to go to, and not only the URL itself, but go to the next linked URL between them. We call that hopping, and see whether it's going to something completely fake or mean, Then with that, we generate additional intel. For instance, we have the so-called JARA rules, and they are ways to identify malware by creating rules for certain patterns and characteristics. Sandboxing is very important. I was stating the MRAE a couple of times. They are using sandboxes where they put the suspicious files in, and they have hypervisors which use the behavior. For instance, a dynamic analysis. Often these viruses have a certain date where they start attacking, so that sandbox, which is completely protected, changes rapidly the dates it runs through in an accelerated way through time, and they see whether something happens. They see that whether something happens based on triggers. Very important to analyze dynamically, because normally at the moment of analysis, this thing might behave completely fine. Same URL links, you have an URL which is, perhaps I hacked myself into IATA servers. I have an IATA URL which seems to be completely harmless, but let's say over the weekend, I changed that link into a deviation to a malicious link, and suddenly this URL is dangerous. So we have to keep on tracking it. When it gets dangerous, crawling it all the time, we have to switch off all files and emails where this link is in. Then we check current indicators of compromise. We look at what was done in the past. We gather more intel on the alert. Did people click on it? Did somebody already submit a password. I'll talk about this later in our loop again. And then we respond, force password resets, block IPs, email URLs, get analysis from the sandbox analytics here, remove the email, or if it's harmless, put it back, collect memory, remove files, isolate PCs, isolate radars, update the user via email, inform him or her that they have been attacked, and then document. Use the metrics, make sure we improve, create tickets to change controls for firewalls, block URLs, re-image user PCs, meaning change the software on it, update the SOAR history, improve our Intel processing tools, update communication channels. This is the lessons learned are so important, and share it, with a shared platform of all other NSP service providers so that they learn from our lessons learned. Exchanging data is very important. And that, leads to this loop here. Instead of a waterfall model, we deploy good indicators for the detection tools. We have to automate it. Folks, we cannot do this manually anymore. Then we determine where we are in the kill chain. This is a horrible word, but it's actually a technical term. It means, where is the attack? Is it just trying? Did somebody click on it? Is a Trojan on your computers? Did we share the passwords with the attacker? And then take action, detect and response. I already said that. It's very important, to write up, create indicators, share it with the other ANSPs, document, live on the lessons learned. Then, if initial detection was low, if we just had something that wasn't performed, perform a manual analysis and see what needs to be improved. And then test the indicators on historical data. Did we perhaps miss something in the past? And then improve our indicators. Thanks again to Jim Byrne, who provided that information. It's a loop. It's not a waterfall model. It needs systems, SOAR. It needs tools, many free, others paid. It needs as a service support. The most often the questions that I get are not about software and protection. They're about who's doing it? Panic, if we attack tomorrow, what do we do? So let's talk about how we set up a system, how we set up a team. We first need the CSIRT leader. That leader needs to show leadership. That person needs to know how to improve security. The person needs to know how to support the program. The person needs to know identity management, cybersecurity, incident response, phishing, encryption. The person needs to know to the board. The worst thing is if nothing happens because the team is super and the board thinks, oh, it's not dangerous because the next step is the budget will go down. No, you have to keep the board in an alert situation. Make sure that they see what you're doing. Give them a weekly report, how many attacks you've been defended, because that makes sure that they will give you the things you need to keep the system and you people and the passengers and everything safe. He has to understand cybersecurity response. Now the functional team. Where is the team coming from? Do I need to find overpaid people from the external, from the market of security experts, which is empty? You wouldn't even find experienced people in the market. It's so difficult because it's the thing of the time. So what kind of people do we need? Heterogeneous technical competencies, We need people which are networkers. We need a desktop people, you know. We need a radio peer person. We need server persons. We need computer network people, you know. Take people who've got specific strengths. You know, you wouldn't find anybody who knows everything. Just take the people from there. Where do I find them? You know, take your motivated juniors who have worked inside your organization. Those who are nerds, but who also can talk to others. You know, those who have specific knowledge about your network. These people should be continuous learners, curious, instinctive, analytical, creative, you know. They need to be hungry, you know. They need to be able to think like the bad guy, like to catch them. They need to be persistent. They need to be able to work under the gun. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if your system is compromised, if your infrastructure is down, every second, not only every minute, every second counts. Work under the gun. Don't have people here who get ill when there's stress. They need to be able to work under adrenaline. You know, the team needs to be able to accept false positives. And because that will help them to run through a continuous learning curve. So the people are already there, they're in your team, you know. Just get them into a structure. You know, you can use the so-called managed security service providers that can support your work, and they make sure you have a rapid ramp up. Outside people already know how things work, and start with them. But as Alexandra Gunevik said rightly, you cannot delegate responsibility. You need to understand the procedures. You need to be able to learn from incidents. You need to be able to conduct continuous system improvement in your system. Conduct continuous system improvement inside your system. You're the masters of security. You will be able to do it. Take the challenge. How are these people getting trained? You know, I've got here the different teams listed, you know, the SOC, you know, training on technology inventory, how to assess it, how to set up seamless security architectures, including encryption, machine and human identity, suitable policies, multi-factor authentications. They need to be technically trained. They need to work with external people to set up and manage systems. The ICAO need to understand and to learn how to behave security compliant. They need to be trained how to generally monitor ATM infrastructures, including all peripheral systems, radio towers, SSR, VCN. They need to be trained how to find and respond to anomalies. The CSIRT, Security Incident Response Team. I personally think they should be a subgroup of ATSAP, but this is, you know, the ongoing strategic discussion. Are they next to it? Are they part of it? Who's in charge of it? Is it the chief security officer who's in charge of it? Is it the chief of ATSAP who is in charge of it? Is it the same team under the chief technical officer? It depends on your strategic orientation, and everything has a justification. ATSAP are the people who are working on the technical systems. You know, they need to be able to be trained on incident response, on pattern analysis, on monitoring, interacting with the rest of ATSAP, ATCO, and admin. The CSIRT and the ATSAP, you decide who and how to set up the team. The ATCO also need to be part of it because also they need to behave security compliant. They need to be trained on how to react on in case of suspected breach of the system. Often they're the first ones who are detecting something because something isn't working properly. On the SkyRadar webpage, we have a couple of videos talking about that and showing you examples. The ATM admin, training on how to behave security compliant, training on how to react in case of suspected breach or in case of system degradation. I'm from SkyRadar, skyradar.com if you want to look for details. What can we do? We can provide laboratories for proactive cybersecurity training. Here, I don't want to provide dummy labs, I want to really provide solutions together with market solutions, together with system manufacturers. So some real systems and play on them. You could buy some software in the market, but let's be honest, this system is too dangerous to play with dummies. Let's be operational here. We provide monitoring systems connected to training radars, tower and radar simulators. You can play on these monitoring systems. The observer can be trained on how to set them even up. We have systems like this one here where they can set up their monitoring based on voltage, based on SNMP protocols, based on pressure, based on servers, network data, which indicates that networks are down. There's got detailed training curricula, and of course also the system which allows ATCO to be rapidly ramped up on how to respond and how to find errors rapidly. We can organize train the trainer seminars by incident response and IT experts. And we work with big players in the industry for operational solutions. So we can set up teams, we can set up calls, we can set up brainstorming meetings, bringing the ANSP, the cybersecurity solution providers, and of course the training providers together and see what can be done. I'm Dr. Ulrich Scholten from SkyRadar. Look at our website for much more information. You can download this PowerPoint and read much more about cybersecurity, incident response, defense, and about jamming, and about electronic countermeasures, and about radar training as such. You also get a link list from us with many of the security links, where to get more information and whom to talk to. And like always, there's a glossary with much more data if you want to read more. I want to thank you for your time. I know that this is a challenge that we're talking about here. Please do not stress. We have to act now, but we have to act thoughtfully, and we have to set up solutions that will work. So, if you're interested about next steps, talk to us and see what we can do. Nevertheless, I wish you a wonderful day, and let's stay in control. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.